When beauty was priced like barley and fate smelled of oil, a boy learned that Athens could polish a soul the way it polishes stone, by grinding it down. Attica, drought years, creditors circling like kites, a valley of gnarled olives, dust in the wells, ledgers opened on a kitchen table. One verdict: payment would bleed. Before the man had a name in that house, he had a chain. Sweat, fear, olive oil, stone on skin. Laughter traveling the corridor like a knife passed hand to hand. The overseer, Demetrius, muscle and memory, stepped into the doorway, and the room shrank to a damp cloth, an order, a timetable for obedience. He was 15, but birthdays were a currency already spent. The marble remembers. The purchase began in the village when a bad harvest turned fathers into accountants and boys into numbers. Slave merchants uncoiled ropes and chains like metal serpents in the square, promised 20 years of service for the winter's bread, weighed teeth and muscle as if they were grain. Silver chimed into a father's palm. Each coin caught sunlight, each coin carried part of a future. The mother looked away. The boy was led with others in a human caravan, blistered feet and iron at the throat, hills shining, sea like shattered glass, beauty reduced to background noise behind the metronome of links striking links. At night they were pegged to the earth, and storms of small sounds moved through the ranks, muffled sobs, feral breathing, the creak of leather. Visitors came with soft hands and ringed fingers, prodded, calculated, spoke the common euphemisms that make crimes sound like careers. Promising, suitable for household, pleasing. Older boys went quiet. Younger ones cried until they were taught silence. Then Athens rose, white and confident, and the market swallowed them whole. The agora's slave pens were a study in scales and spectacle, voices thrown like nets, urine and oil in the heat, bodies ranked by price. He was washed and oiled to a shine. Merchandise must gleam, and set with the inward-facing lot, the indoor faces. The auctioneer praised age, origin, teeth, temperament.
Then, as craters emptied, a different pace took the room. Shoulders to knead, grapes to feed, the slow orbit of certain eyes. A guest old enough to be a grandfather asked for the boy to sit and talk of home. His questions were kind until his hand forgot the meaning of speech. Protests thinned into the laughter of others. The body learned the vocabulary of force. Childhood ended under a roof painted with laurels. This was not an outlier, it was the curriculum. Some came for humiliation, some for experiments in pain, some for the soliloquy that ends in a scream. The household had a hierarchy as precise as a ledger. The newest fed the appetite of novelty. Those who lasted might be moved to kitchens or personal service if they learned the calculus of surrender. Resistance existed, but it was costly theater. Marcus recaptured and beaten to a limp. Alexios chained 3 days in the sun for saying no. Other forms of resistance went underground. The living corpse stare, the anticipatory smile, the disappearing act inside one's own skull. The marble remembers. Athens sent its best men to the couches. Dionysius spoke on justice by day and graded degradation by night, quoting Homer between commands. Cleomamanes funded fountains and liked to mark bodies with lessons. A celebrated sophist published on the good life, then constructed syllogisms to bless cruelty. They felt no contradiction. Virtue was for equals. Property absorbed pain without moral recoil. The city's famous leisure was mined from silence. Months became years. He mastered absence. He read rooms by the hinge of a wrist, the temperature of a glance, the octave of a laugh. He practiced invisibility until even mirrors forgot him. His voice flattened, his accent ironed away, his reflexes learned to bow before thought. The system's genius revealed itself. Fear could be outsourced to habit. The marble remembers. Still, small human economies survived. Names whispered like contraband. A crumb saved and passed wrist to wrist, a thumb tracing a homeland's pattern on a friend's palm. A tiny god carved from trash and hidden in a crack behind a couch. Witness became a discipline. Catalog remember, say it back in the language they could not steal. The house itself performed its own paradox. Frescoes lit by oil lamps, a tiled Perseus underfoot, and behind the wall a room that turned philosophy into theater of harm. During a victory feast, young aristocrats invented a game with points, commands, and a human scoreboard. Something gave way inside him then. A thread he hadn't known was still taut. He accepted the category assigned. Not person, but instrument. Numbness arrived like mercy. Demetrius noticed, promoted. Better cloth, steadier bread, a cell with a slim window. Others stared with the mixed awe and dread reserved for the perfectly trained. Then the market trip, chains ringing the midday glare, a boy with dark hair and mountain eyes. Recognition struck like fever. Demetrius asked if the heat made him ill. He said yes and watched himself lie. Days after, the boy's face walked his dreams, and memories came with it. Wild time in a mother's bread, the cold on a ridge in early spring, a father's joke stitched into the wind. Dangerous cargo, those images. They could pry open the seal on survival. The refrain returned, softer now. The marble remembers. One quiet symposium brought a chamber of elders debating virtue, innate or taught, while a slave poured and stood between sentences. Someone argued that some souls were born for chains. Someone else argued for nurture. He understood, with a clarity that hummed, that the argument was not ignorance. It was alibi. Knowledge sharpened choice. Brilliance did not disinfect appetite. The art, the treatises, the reforms, none were antidotes. They were ornaments worn over bone, years set like plaster. He learned thresholds, how long beauty lasted, when novelty expired, when a face became furniture. New boys arrived to be broken. Respected citizens rotated through with their private appetites. The city's lights glittered in a pattern that never altered. At a small window he counted stars as if they were debts. If his parents still breathed, they breathed in a different ledger. Regret felt like a ritual he no longer had the funds to perform. The end came as arithmetic. He was perhaps 25. Utility slipping, cough anchored in the chest, scars speaking the decades of a short life. Demetrius said the quiet part quietly. Sold to a mine. Not a punishment, not a prize, a calculation. The mountain would finish what the house began. The marble remembers. On his last night, Marcus pressed something into his hand, a sharpened sliver of metal, decisive as a sentence ending. The options were three, each with an argument. Flight and the thin hope. Revenge and the brief blaze. Self-harvest and the final choice. Dawn found a fourth. He hid the shard where another might find it. Leaving a tool where he had been left a chain became his single-authored line. The road north braided the past through the present. Pines talking in a language he remembered, eagles riding thermals like old gods, a stream flashing fish silver at a bend. Guards knew their trade, chains knew their work. He said goodbye to breath and color as if he were cataloging exhibits. The camp was a negative of the city, earth instead of marble, but the same equation. Tunnels bit into slopes, dust made lungs fall inward. Quotas were designed to convert bodies to ore before memory could organize. Yet even there, a human commons. Food pooled, watches shared, messages carried along subterranean veins, the stubborn practice of naming. Stories were braided. Aegean islands meeting Black Sea coasts, meeting inland herdsman myths. And the boy from the Olive Valley became an account others held in trust. The marble remembers. His death was work-like. A cough that would not unclasp, a collapse, arms that didn't rise. No witnesses named in ledgers, only fellow slaves promising to say his name in places it could still live. But the story did not consent to burial. learned to travel under doors and across centuries, to live in the vents of respectability. The galleries that display Greek beauty require a light careful enough to avoid glare. The same care reveals stains if one bothers to look. The city that gave symposium and theorem built its leisure on erased people. The contradiction was not an accident, it was a load-bearing wall, and time did not extinguish the design, only reupholstered it. Modern hands sanitize mechanisms with law and euphemism. Supply chains learn to curve away from conscience. Platforms learn to turn loneliness into metrics. The faces are different. The appetite is conserved. The speeches are smoother. The shelves are fuller. The transaction is familiar. Some bodies emptied so that others can be full. Complex arguments still dress simple wrongs. Beautiful art still hangs beside blunt harm. We hold panels on ethics under lights made by the tired. We quote poets in rooms where no one asks who scrubbed the floor at dawn. Tyranny refines itself. It does not retire. The marble remembers. The boy's name is gone. His use value was measured. His record expired. But systems have a sound if you press your ear to them. And under the hum of law and philosophy, you can still hear the old chorus, auctioneer's patter, chain on stone, the breath of a child trying to be quiet while grown men talk about virtue. Tonight, somewhere, that conversation continues in a brighter room with better wine. Somewhere else, a ledger is opened on a kitchen table and a family learns the price of winter. It is not a mystery how civilizations shine. It is a decision about where to put the shadow. The marble remembers.